Well, good morning and or good afternoon and welcome back, as the case might be. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte. I'm a technology strategy partner and host of this particular series of live webcasts that we have been bringing to you for the last 2.5 years now. Many of you would know that we are using this particular channel to showcase conversations with technology leaders in Canada, individuals who are shaping the future of our country. And we are also using this channel to share with the audiences what we believe are timely and important topics on technology leadership, technology management, technology trends. Today's session is one of those sessions. It's part of our Tech Trends 2023 launch in Canada. And this is actually our final deep dive into the trend number 6, the trend on mainframe modernization. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two colleagues and friends, experts in both the future of technology, but also in mainframes. I'll introduce them in a moment. But before I do, just a reminder that this is a live session, which gives you, the audience members, an opportunity to engage and ask questions. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function of our Zoom platform, and we are going to do our best to address your questions within the particular hour that we are in. With that, I'm going to jump right into the topic and very briefly invite and introduce Mike Bechtel. Mike Bechtel, I know, has the coolest title of everyone at Deloitte. He's our chief futurist and the gentleman responsible for our future forward thinking on technology. Mike is going to start our conversation today by providing the context and backdrop on our tech trends. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time focused on the deep dive into this very, very relevant, timely, and sometimes emotionally charged topic of mainframe modernization. And for that, I am thrilled to welcome Thorsten Bernecker, our Deloitte's, I would say, intergalactic leader of our mainframe modernization practice. So Thorsten is joining us from Austin, Texas this morning. Mike, I believe you're back home in Chicago, and I'm here in Canada, so we have an intercontinental discussion. Mike, over to you for the context of our Tech Trends 2020.
Oh, goodness. Well, Dalibor, cliches are cliches for a reason, which is why I never hesitate to open with gratitude and say what a pleasure it is to jam with you every other week for the last 2 months. Like, seriously, we've laughed, we've avoided crying, we've made memories, and we've hit such a variety of topics, and today's is no exception. So thanks for having us. And to, well, I guess geography is relative, but to my friends up north, AKA y'all are just at home, thanks for inviting us to the Digital Canada for the last couple months, because it's been a real treat.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, pal. So also, I have to acknowledge this in case one of my teammates is visiting. 2 weeks ago, I was at the Abundance 360 conference in Los Angeles, California, and I was so smitten with the power of exponential technologies as regards everything from AI to longevity that I think I lost my better scruples and found myself wearing a hooded vest on the last session. And my teammates teased me relentlessly. They're like, when did you become that guy? And so I just want to let everybody know I'm just back to me this week. Okay.
Awesome.
So here we go. So team, I didn't know hooded vests were a thing. Did you, Dalibor?
I'm sorry?
I never knew hooded vests were even a thing. I didn't know you could get a vest with a hood.
I did not know that.
It was very pioneering.
That
Thorsten,
is new.
You have any hooded vests? No?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, well, you live in Austin, though.
That's some
There we go.
Okay. So team, feel good energy, because this is our last session for covering the tech trends and a little bit about the tech trends, right? Super primer, because presumably everybody here has been to maybe at least one of these already. But Deloitte Tech Trends, right? We chronicle what's new and next in tech. We make heads or tails out of novelties popping up around the world that figure to become normalcy for the rest of us, right? For you and me over the next couple of years. Because the idea in Futures, it's old hat, but some hearing it the first time really love it, that the future's already here, right? It's just not very evenly distributed. And so with that in mind, right, there is no telephoto, right? There's no crystal ball. There's no time machine, right? The crystal ball is the wide angle lens, right? If we look globally, we can find little faces of your future in work today. And so that work is a lot easier when we recognize a couple of important truths. And one of those truths is the recognition that the whole history of information technology emergence, right, of billion-dollar stories over most of our lives have been stories about evolutions, not revolutions, in these three tracks, right? That human-computer interaction has been a story of interfaces getting simpler, right? The technology beneath them that powers them, that gets more complicated for sure, right? But it gets more complicated so that our experiences as end users can get easier, right? You used to need a PhD to feed punch cards to a machine the size of a room, right? My dad's generation, right? You went to night school to learn how to work a mini computer, right? I showed up, I didn't even know how to read, right? Because I had icons and GUIs and, windows. And well, we've got a current generation, they don't even need good posture, right? Because they can just pick up a phone and touch and swipe their way to what they need. It's simplicity. On the information, insights, and data front, right? It's been a story of exponentially increasing intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so when somebody approaches me, and they do every day, right, with this revolution that is generative AI, right? Oh my goodness gracious, machines writing poetry, painting pictures, and doing strategy work. Through the long lens of history, you say, okay, listen, AI is whatever computers can't do yet, right? And so today, that means putting together some really compelling business analyst level prose, right? 10 years ago, it was beating Lee Sedol in Go.
Yep.
And actually 5 years ago. Before that, Jeopardy, before that, chess, before that, quadratic equations. The real point is AI isn't new, but there's always something new in AI. Machines are and always have been and will continue to get more capable and intelligent. As one of my colleagues said down your way, Thorsten, down in Austin at South by Southwest a couple of weeks ago, they said, listen, AI isn't going to put any of us out of business. Humans effectively wielding AI, those are the threats who stand to put us out of business. And so recognizing that we have to work with these machines, not against them, I think that's the adult way to approach it. Now, on the computation front, where we will be spending some time today, right, is this recognition that for 50, 60, 80 years, it was a story of Moore's law, right? Better, faster, cheaper, stronger, and smaller and cheaper were the real buzzwords, right? More with less, capacity doubles, price halves every 18 months. Great. And about 15 years ago, right, we started to see parallelization, right? Like you don't need more gigahertz, you need more cores, right? Which just means like hit 6 of today's processor and line them up. And then, cloud, right? Well, how about 6,000? And we'll put them in another building, right? Mm-hmm. And then blockchain. Okay, well, let's get rid of the building entirely and just use the whole planet as the computer. Okay. Well, that's all really compelling, right? This idea of doing more with less, about yielding abundance where we were worried we were facing scarcity as regards compute. But folks, here's the thing. As we chase down simpler interactions, smarter information knowledge management systems, right, and more capable computational constructs. Right? We as business leaders have to realize, you can't get to what you want next without taking care of what you have now. Right? And so the people, the business side, we hit a couple weeks back, right? With flexibility, the best ability. Cyber trust, the idea that none of us is as trustworthy as all of us, the idea of navigating to truth in a post-trust era creates a new and viable use case for a triple ledger. Great. But the story we're going to talk about today, and why I'm so excited Thorsten is here, is our cool. I think you've got the coolest job, intergalactic champion of all things modernization. But all of us, right, as technology leaders, have some existing something that needs to be dragged kicking and screaming into this big, blue, beautiful tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so part of our recognition as Deloitte is that, like if we were serving teeny tiny startups, right, 2 gals in a garage, we could spend all our time talking about Gen AI. We spend all our time talking about AR, VR, spend all our time talking about blockchain. But the fact is, probably most of us on this call today, we've got some rusty but trusty systems that need to be managed and maintained and ideally modernized so that they can bring their goodness to bear on the rest of it. Said another way, you can't get to what's new without dealing with what you have now. Or as technology strategist Pink Floyd likes to say, right, you can't have your pudding until you eat your meat. And so that's all to say, team. Today's trend, connect and extend, mainframe modernization hits its stride. It's really part of the recognition that mainframe as a topic ain't going away. Because as much enthusiasm as we've had for cloud, for virtualization, for all the shiny novelty, right? And as well-founded as that conversation is, the fact is that a huge percentage of business critical systems run on big metal, right? Run on mainframes. And the rumor of mainframes, demise kind of greatly exaggerated, right? Like, Is it declining as a piece of the pie? Sure. But the fact is, when you look at the fact that the pie continues to grow, you realize that, and Thorsten, you probably know the figures better than me, man, as we start to bring you into the conversation here, sir. Like IBM made a bucket of new cash selling, serving, and maintaining big metal over the last year. And I'm sure they're not the only one. I mean, what have you seen with respect to mainframe viability and modernization as a share of spend, Thorsten? You've probably got all sorts of facts and figures.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, all the third-party provider of software, be it software AG with the natural database, or you find them always in some certain like discoveries, kind of what all sits in there. It's not IBM only, but then obviously we can talk about some of those modernizations. I have some anecdotes for sure.
Cool. No, I can't wait. And so to get there with pace, I would simply say, folks, there's a lot of mainframe tech that remains very business critical. And it's not, you don't lead at a cocktail party with this mainframe work you're doing, right? Because in a world of, digital paintings and poems and, blockchain based this and unlimited reality based that, there's a lot of other shiny stuff that tends to get the mic. But the fact is, a lot of the workaday responsibility and obligation continues to sit with mainframe and requires that modernization effort. Right? What's new? Well, Thorsten's going to blow our minds with all the kinds of stuff that tends to be new, but a few that we've chronicled in this year's tech trends. We've seen interesting AI ML-based approaches to inventorying and unlocking capabilities sitting in these classical systems, right? The US Air Force, right? In conjunction with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which has brought us, the internet, mRNA vaccines, GPS, the big stuff, right? The geniuses over there, and I mean it, that's not a pejorative, the literal geniuses over there said, hey, let's build a spoken language kind of low code, no code ontology system that lets us ask for a notional weapons system or back office capability in plain English, and it will automatically create the functional and technical architecture that can deliver or embody that desired capability. So for example, say, I want a missile guidance system that works with these classes of rocket. It needs to avoid these classes of radar. It also needs to comply with these classes of regulatory need. Give me your best. And throws you an architecture. But here's the fun bit, right? Or the relevant bit. Some of those components it ropes into the mix are mainframe components, right? Because there's a recognition, right, from US Air Force leadership that we don't need to throw out all the babies with the bathwater, right? That some of these systems are well tested, well performing, and they, properly integrated, can play along great with the really white hot new, sort of cloud-based stuff. And so in short, kind of a better together story of old and new as managed through low code, no code, AI, and ontology system. Now on the NVIDIA front, what's that all about? Well, one of the things we're seeing is this recognition that, because mainframe sounds definitionally old, right? There's a lot of really smart organizations out there who are building mainframes by another name, right? NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA coming into market with high performance on-premises GPU compute, right? Like high performance computing architecture. Okay, what's that? It kind of sounds like a mainframe, right? But granted, right, it's altogether new stack, it's altogether new language, it's altogether new logical architecture because of GPU-based compute as opposed to CPU. But the takeaway is, in their view, right, and in many, in ours, there are classes of problem that lend themselves to depth of processing as opposed to breadth. Right? If you're doing, if you're doing certain kinds of big data, work, right? Social network graph analysis, by all means, parallelize that across the cloud and enjoy all the elasticity, agility, flexibility, all the ility words. But if you're looking to run a linear batch, right? One set of calcs on one set of data, you're not going to beat, right, a supercomputer whose one job in the world is to do that thing. And so enter like an altogether new class of mainframes by another name. Now that said, sometimes the trick, right? Sometimes this is, I'll let people put eyes on that, but I'm actually going to use verbally segue over to Thorsten. Sometimes, right, doubling down on or otherwise wrapping what you got ain't the answer, right? Sometimes full-on modernization is.
Yes.
And so, with that recognition, I've officially reached the creaky limits of my pay grade as regards mainframe modernization. I would love to, Thorsten, let you introduce yourself, contextualize your journey to current, and show our folks what real state-of-the-art mainframe modernization is all about here in 23.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Dalibor. Obviously, I really like the title they now have. It's really awesome. And you said that pretty right with that cocktail bar. Whenever I had a question kind of after work, hey, what are you doing for work? Oh, that is not fun to talk about. But the fun fact is actually, like, we're literally taking the mission critical system. It's not the Mickey Mouse applications. It's like the hard bread and butter. This is kind of what we're addressing. And like, there's like I always put systems in like 4 categories where they can fail. Like, it's obviously the first one, you have a UI UX experience, it's not working well, people just stop using it. The second one is then basically where you have like small rounding errors that may up to a bit of portion, but still it's kind of smaller things. The next one where you have significant issues, where you millions kind of the system is going wrong. And the fourth is actually kind of where life may be threatened and implied, right? And fun fact, not fun fact, but like the mainframe modernization covers all. We did, or I did, journeys where everything has been covered, even to the last one. What I saw, wow, this is no longer a joke. Nevertheless, hey, maybe I do a little bit of an intro, kind of that kind of where I'm from. So I'm from Munich. And so I'm here now in Austin, Texas. The journey is quite fun. So 15 years old, I thought it's always fun with legacies to start with legacy, I guess. I was with Commodore Amiga, like 15 years old, saw all the video games and thought, wow, I need to do this by myself. Like obviously no internet. You really need to do kind of the reverse engineering, see how things work, assembler coding. So that really excited me. I think that was super cool. Eventually, I started my master's computer science, and I thought, wow, I have no idea how I'm ever going to make money with that. So I applied as a student, for a company, and they must be really desperate already back in the days. I was probably the fourth or fifth employer, and they asked me, hey, do you know COBOL? Do you know natural database? vSAN? I kind of, wow, no idea. No C++, assembler. I think Delphi was already starting back in the days, like the 90s. Nevertheless, I got the job and I figured, wow, everything I know, everything I thought, that doesn't apply here, right? Even like when in the 2000s, we have version controls. There were the pessimistics one and the old green screens. Everything I thought is kind of the IT didn't apply to the mainframe. Did my master thesis and decide, wow, I need to found a company. And so I founded a company. And basically what you all said, Mike, I done that was basically, I call it augmented modernization. The mainframe was never thought to go away in the 2000s. It's about how do you modernize? And obviously we've seen that probably like screen scraping where you put another UI. Right. And so what I started doing is obviously I started parsing the code, ripped out the UI, generated the UI. Back in the day, it's called model-driven development. Now you call it low-code, no-code. But this was kind of the things where I wanted to get the mainframe a better things, develop the product like Eclipse plugins where you could develop like the mainframe languages in an Eclipse plugin, then also have like the DevOps, the CI/CD that you basically how can you tie a ticket system like Jira to the to the versioning system and then basically deploy the code, because obviously the mainframe systems or the organizations don't work like you do full releases. They do per day incrementally only what changed. So like brought a lot of products there, modernized, but eventually people ask me, dude, that's awesome, but can we shut down the mainframe? It's no longer strategic.
Yeah, so great job. Kill it.
So 2010, that's where I then started literally kind of then going into this whole like addressing the core, how can you modernize? And we talk about the R's and how that all looks like later. Nevertheless, I then had the chance, so German guy kind of, the big market is here in the US, it's happening here. So founded a company there as well. And then I started competing against Deloitte. So we won a couple of times. And then I met a buddy now of mine, Marlon Metzger. He runs the application modernization innovation and as offering leader directly under CBO. And basically he kind of saw what we've been doing. And he thought, okay, if you can't beat them, join them or partner with them. So we did successful projects. Eventually turned into an acquisition 2017. That's when I then joined Deloitte as a partner. And now what you call the intergalactical, I really like that. Still, I think that's the Beastie Boys song that always kind of, when you have that name, that kind of goes off in my head. Nevertheless, so I'm running now all the modernization migrations in the US, but also pretty globally. So I'm involved, like obviously with all y'all's kind of what's happening in Canada, lots of engagements we're having, Australia, Germany a lot, UK, so Spain, there's like all that good stuff. I always feel the US, Canada always ahead of like where the modernization going, but we see that now also obviously happening in other countries. So, so when I just go and share my slides here, prepped some, not as fancy as yours, I have to admit.
Listen, Thorsten, I've got a whole team who puts that good looking design on there. If it was just me, mine would have looked just like yours, brother.
They look phenomenal, and I definitely had kind of questions when I saw my work that I did. Nevertheless, I hope it's more about the data on it. Yeah. And not, it looks like the mainframe really looked like a Borg spaceship. I really like that. Cool. So, one thing, Mike, you're saying, like with this whole, again, I call it augmented modernization. You're absolutely spot on. Like when you open up the news, you will probably hear a lot of those failed modernizations. And on the left, you see kind of all the things that could go wrong. It could literally start with like you find bugs later because you were missing business rules, or you basically have completely brand reputation that's going down because you had like issues going on. And on the right, you see some just grabbed some of the newspaper articles I found, and I think that way more. For example, here also in Texas, there was a child support modernization where the state at 400 million basically kind of pulled the plug and kind of said, okay, that won't be any success. So it's really crazy to see how many of those go wrong. And of course, if you see that, like this type of a journey, just getting a modernization isn't something that's fun. It's like, it doesn't give you any reward. You just changing a technology to some other extent. And the main question is always kind of, what's the benefit of this? And then obviously like decision makers will ask, is that something I want to risk with? So yes, absolutely. We've seen those augmentation. But now something I basically see, and I just made that slide. So if you ask me, hey, where's the source? So
you are the source.
I'm the source. And obviously that's easy to say, but nevertheless, obviously we're trying to talk about the trends. But take that what you're saying, these augmentation modernizations as a side. What obviously we did a lot of those mainframe modernizations. And if I need to make a bet, I think in 5 to 7 years, probably in all states, the mainframes are already gone. So we are actively kind of like retiring, literally taking them over, Java.NET, all that good stuff. But now what I just see, and Mike, you need to let me know, is that the ChatGPT excitement that happens, that everyone sees, wow, there's so much going on with the predictivity, like the things are happening, the simplicity, where people feel, wow, if I just augment at the side, I'm not addressing the core, the batch system, I will still then run a batch job overnight, and it will just process one record at a time. That's what the mainframe is built for. That's what it's good. But the reality is the data is never in real time, and that's what we got used to. So we're seeing a significant, like literally the last couple of months, it's crazy how much of a run there is. And I let you know what also changed, like how we deliver, what we're seeing, how those modernizations do look like. But again, there's a completely change, and I'm curious when Gardner and others will report about this.
I mean, but to your point, Thorsten, when you mention like generative AI and like the GPT type models, do you find that that's sort of lighting a candle or a flame under people because they're saying like if I don't modernize my stack, I'm not going to be able to enjoy these wonderful toys? Is that sort of the idea?
Yes. So I like this AI ML introduction into the modernization is definitely part of the journey. So it's basically 2 slides down. I will completely cover that question, but it's pretty spot on. Cool. So what I'm gonna start with is basically just setting the stage here. Like back in the days, tech guy as we all are, I basically even went to market with the technical driven modernization approach. I like people, hey, we don't have COBOL developers. Can you bring me a new tech stack from a Java.NET, whatever the language is? Or, hey, again, we have a license agreement with a third-party vendor that sits in that IBM, like CAGen, whatever, like CA, whatever they're called. Hey, we need to get that off. Just technically, we all approached it technically, and eventually there was always the refactored type approach we were doing there. But what's truly changing is the business-driven modernization approach. And what I basically mean by that, it's basically like when you talk about mainframe modernizations, any type of modernization, it's loaded with emotions. It's like, obviously, I always call it the resume-driven modernization. Like so many people want to have a say in there. Kind of, obviously, they all, in Germany, we have a saying, you don't put golden sinks and hoses everywhere, for example, in the cellar. So what I'm trying to say, don't look at the mainframe as a whole and basically cut the mainframe in its different sub-capabilities and then put them very unemotional on this matrix that I provided. And also I use some of the...
So just a sec, what you just said is very, I think, important for people to appreciate. Don't look at the mainframe as a whole when you're thinking about modernization, but instead segment it into distinct domains of functionality, right?
Exactly.
And then for each one of those domains of functionality, there could be unique right answer, right?
Exactly.
Okay, good. Gotcha.
Exactly. So, we will look later at what that mean. But nevertheless, obviously, the mainframe is not like back in the days, almost everything was developed. There may be some, for example, in banking, there were some core systems they basically inherited all the source code, still been developed by a third-party vendor. They may or may not have the IP to it, but more or less, the mainframe did cover everything. And I think, Mike, that's also what you had in your tech trend, like really focus on the things. But nevertheless, if you just cut down the mainframe to all these applications, what I then always try kind of, hey, let's talk on the horizontal, on the x-axis, you see how does the application, the capability kind of fit with current business requirements. So basically, does it do the job right now or not? Like to the right, yes, it does. To the left, not so much. But then also put it on a strategic axis, the y-axis, where you want to go. What's kind of missing? What's the backlog, and how important? And if I start to the top, the bottom right, the stable, the cloud suitable, that's where I then say, hey, so it does what it does. Perfect. There's no real strategy behind it. So why do you even think you want to re-architect, rewrite it? Just take it over. Just lift and shift it. Bring it over. And again, also, I will show you later how that all coexists and fit together. But just really put this business thinking there first. Then on the top right, it's basically, okay, it's strategic now, but it's also super strategic going forward. Wow, okay, this is something where you differentiate from your competitors. That's not where you want to do a SaaS or whatever. This should be 100% cloud native, agile, that you can basically do whatever you want to do. The information at your fingertip, like responsive and all that good stuff you're thinking in the cloud, like business requirements kind of able to be put in there pretty quick by, for example, business rules, whatever you want to have there. But it's basically the re-architect or even rewrite that sits in here. And by the way, I'm not using the R's as I think they're always kind of dirty. Everyone uses them different. Maybe this is, if we have time, I can also give you my scoop on this, how we address it. Nevertheless, the top left is, Mike, probably where you're going. This is, I just call it, hey, not really something that's covered in your system right now, but there's a huge chance that you can have that. And obviously, this is the whole predictivity, like the whole predictiveness of applications. So for example, if you think, hey, there might be something where you select a vendor through a query like mainframe, right? You have 10 records at a row and you scroll through, okay, which vendor can basically kind of deliver what I need? Wow, would it be awesome if you have some predictability kind of on the data that this vendor was always in time. He had, there were no really issues by just helping you some certain things to make better as something. And this is, I call them quick wins. I call them introduce that, put this absolutely in your roadmap that there are goals who kind of make it better. And then again, this is then where we introduce AI ML. And then lastly, obviously there's sunset things. And when you look at this, there will be sunsetting obviously with a domain, like that domain we can replace by a SaaS. I just put that in here. Could be obviously also the replace, but you sunset that piece of code, you replace it by SaaS. It may not longer be needed anymore because it's not strategic, but it could be also horizontally things you now get for free, right? From the hyperscalers. Could be like archival, could be securities, loggings, all that good stuff. Just sunset that as well. So this is again the 4 quadrants that I use, and it's really good to see how people then respond, because they take the emotions away, because then the business has a say. And it's hard to justify an expensive modernization journey when you're on one of the bottom ones, right?
I was going to ask, maybe I'll just intersperse. There's a question that came up just now from the audience on how organizations develop business cases to pay for mainframe modernization. I think what you're suggesting here is there are 4 different, almost like categories of rationale, right? Are you able to comment on how do you see organizations actually make a successful business case to make investment to modernize?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just hop to the next slide because literally that's how this is basically the topic. I know it's a loaded page, and I just I just created it again, not as fancy. But the top left, the drivers, you basically like the business driver, like it's way harder to get money for a technical modernization. Like, again, it's always the biggest competitor, like I said, it's to do nothing category. Hey, it does it right now. And if there's no license violations, whatever, that justify the cost are like, obviously we had it's CapEx cost that maybe already have invested. So it's hard to justify. But now if you look at those drivers, and they're basically like, obviously they're industry trends, right? And for example, if you look at banking, and this is, for example, from the banking space, there's so many things that influence, and we all know, like, the batch systems that, when you look at your credit cards and you see, oh, it's being processing, guess what? It's a batch job. It's not real time because there are some batch systems working on it. So wouldn't that be like, this are all the drivers that, like, this digital or kind of native thing kind of are like banks that come out of nowhere may compete. Just it's hard to justify to stick with the old technology and then probably lose with all what you're saying with this simplicity, the intelligence, the predictability, not to do it. And but on the left side, and this is, I think, the more important one, what we like the biggest success of a mainframe modernization, if the client and the vendor, like us, for example, work together as a team. And what we've seen, if we talk to the CXOs, to the VPs, and literally ask them what are their personal goals, like where they're being paid against for this year. And it's quite astonishing to see when you take those and overlay them on the, like, put them then on the roadmap, build those priorities that you see, that basically then, like, build that roadmap. You will have quick wins pretty quick that justify those investments pretty quick. And on the other side, like, and that's probably my point here, like, when you take this big monolithic system, the first one, what most people want to see is, can you do something to reduce the MSUs? That's basically how you're being built against IBM. And one easy one is just, hey, let's take all the read-only data onto the cloud. We just have them, like, sync in real time, per night, whatever is reasonable. And then basically you can do all the reporting already. So you save a lot of MSUs already as a quick win. This is easy to sell, right? Everyone understands, well, you basically can tell me in six, maybe 8, 9 months, you already have some load over, and then I have all the reporting there and it drops significant. Yes, sure. So this is something that sells by itself. But then on the other side, if you truly kind of have the management with their priorities, that might mostly align to the industry trends that we're seeing from obviously the GSI, see kind of what's happening in that sector, pair the sector with the personal ones, and then basically have those priorities. It's the money, the funding comes pretty quick. Obviously, there are other ways of funding, but this is a little bit totally different topic. More than happy to kind of help about self-funding models we do, but I don't want to do a lot of marketing there. But again, if y'all want to reach out, more than happy than this.
So what we are seeing, so Thorsten, what we are seeing on the upper right side, this strangler pattern, this is what you described earlier as the way you would encourage people to think about mainframe removal and modernization, is to segment it into components of functionality and then address them one by one as then the mainframe MSUs get reduced and costs get reduced down to zero, right?
Yeah. The strangler pattern is obviously known, and you can look it up. It's kind of interesting with the plans that basically cut pieces away. But the idea is literally you melt down the mainframe. Like, obviously there might be, like I said, the first ones might be technical driven, like the read only, but then and also duplicates and stuff. But nevertheless, you take out domain by domain, and eventually you have a rest then over. That there's no business justification anymore. And that's the last slide. And then I just recommend, okay, take one of those language translations, hit the button, refactor it, and kind of have it over
and move over.
side.
Yeah.
Because then there's nothing that's worth being paid for. But obviously it's you have a very agile and quick wins coming across. So this is how we see why the trend is really going up on business-based modernization, business-driven legacy modernization.
Yeah.
Again, I have some, we can talk about how we do this and like, hey, Strangler pattern is new. Why are you now saying it works? Versus there may be so many stories you hear they're not working. So when you come back to the other approach, this is now the technical driven. I just want to, for completeness, cover, obviously, I don't do the R's so much, but just pretty quick. Obviously, I basically just differentiate between the three. And I don't know, you can obviously do rewrite, re-architect. I put them in the same bucket. It's about the center one. It's truly about, hey, get all the business rules that are in there, get the data lineage, get everything you have, like capture the status quo. And then basically you do either a large scale code refactoring or you do rewrite. And large scale code refactoring obviously uses patterns. I can also talk a little bit about that. And then on the other side, replaced by COTS. If there's a SaaS solution, if there's something out there, absolutely. The left one is what some people call garbage in, garbage out, line by line migration. You have 1 million lines of COBOL code, you have 1 million lines of Java code later. It will 100% work. It's highly automated and it's super quick. And just giving you timelines, those, even if you would consider, I don't care about this whole business-driven approach, I just want to get the mainframe shut down because there's a license violation. There are projects, references who did this under a year, like even in a regular pregnancy timeframe where you can do this. Doesn't matter how doesn't fully. It really depends how much interface and partners you have that is then requiring project management to work all of these interface partners. But this is kind of obviously the technical approach, and you will always have the reasons why. Before you ever do this, you need to have a full understanding what you have, like in not having all those pitfalls. And we call it discovery mining, however, and it's basically in a quick, short time, all the code, and I always compare it like a Mars rover. It just goes through, collects everything it finds, and it quantifies, it tells. And with that, basically, we're then adding all the taxonomies, the domain knowledge, kind of which code belongs to what domain. And then you get those graphs you see on the left, like this is a neighborhood graph, but you see how much intertwined those are. How much does it take to extract them, to melt them off the mainframe? And it's so useful. And like fun facts, and I'm again, this is probably what really makes me work every day today. When you talk to a large CIO, and I mean like top 5 large, right, from a sector, and they suddenly put one of those discoveries or pictures on the back of their Zoom screen, and suddenly they identify kind of what they have as a status quo. I think, wow, this is awesome, right? And nevertheless, this is the bread and butter to make the right understanding which path you do. And everything I'm saying is you should always have it kind of tool-based, right? Don't go into the Excel-based hell back and forth where you're getting the stakeholders, where with the architects, with the database DBAs, database administrators and stuff. Nevertheless, whatever you then choose, and that's basically everything can be as cloud native as it can be. Like again, completely bounded context. We usually, like I usually see 3-tier APIs being introduced in there, like from the database to the UX, and in the middle some glue stuff. But you eventually end up in a completely event-driven architecture, and then basically landing zones are usually always cloud. I've not seen any of the last projects doing on-prem anymore, because it's no longer really strategic, and that's changed probably the last 2 years.
So Thorsten, what you're describing in the discover phase, the first step, it almost feels like archaeology, right?
Yes.
So you're digging into what is generally unknown and likely, perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even unknowable, because people who wrote that have retired decades ago, right? So this is discovery, but it's also to a certain degree archaeology. And so I can completely understand the criticality of getting this right, are there tools and techniques that actually can translate this and do this automatically?
Yes, absolutely. And that's key, Dalibor. It's if you don't have that automatically, again, you bring in emotions. If you, for example, do complexity analysis and so you show kind of what the complexity is, how much like literally you violate from a, like for example, the tools should check the database, they should check the code, just call it spaghetti code, whatever. And you will find out if you have a bounded context, obviously we all know, right? That code should only access this database and no cross-references. That it's just binary metric, how much violations you have. So there is no more argument. Like there, literally what I see when we bring this back and it's everything tool-based, we usually, and there are a lot of those folks still sitting in the room. Usually we get laughs from people. Whoa, it's that program, I knew it. It's that developer, I knew it.
I'm sure.
But this is kind of how you have to approach it, right? 100% automated. Like this is just the truth. Sorry, that's what we find. And it's kind of quite funny how that then also differs what the CXOs think they have versus the reality is. One of huge modernization we're in right now. It's a huge financial institute. I can't tell the name, but nevertheless, they were saying, hey, we don't have COBOL. Nope, nothing. And then I said, cool, but you have batch. Yeah, sure, we got batch. So we got batch jobs. Yeah, we got batch jobs. What do the batch jobs invoke? Silent. Eventually was 20 million lines of code. Super. That then obviously they just thought it's just that little, but we obviously but once we scan that, we can then tell, and then also knowing how much assembler, how much third party, and again, how much is that intertwined, and where does it make sense, overlaying kind of what you find from a technical, overlaying with the business strategy that I was talking about.
So Thorsten, a question for you. When you see organizations stumble and fail, these biggest failures that end up in newspapers, are there some common risks or common issues that you have identified that you can share with us? Like where organizations fail here?
Yeah, so first of all, it's underestimating what you have. Like if you just look at the green screen, sorry, then it just sounds easy. It looks easy, right? Whoa, what does this thing do? It's just a 80 by 24 screen, right? Yep. So it's completely underestimating. Then it's a lot what I refer to the resume-driven development, resume-driven modernization, and just make the check. Take one of your best tech guys for lunch, for breakfast every half year. He will always tell you a new technology. And with that being said, obviously that's fun, that's super cool, but you cannot being influenced by that kind of what's trendy. You really have to have something mature that where you want to land in, and you should have like so many people ask us, well, you got all the tools. So basically everything I'm telling, we got tools for everything. And that's, I think, the biggest differentiator in general. It needs to be everything automated as possible.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, like it's the same if you do Home Depot and I build a house, right? Or I modernize my house, you get all the tools. That's fun. That could be a nice life challenge. But nevertheless, the craftsman may be bringing more quality, may stick more to time. I know that's probably a bad analogy because we all know when that goes wrong. Nevertheless, I'd always say, don't focus on that journey. Be part of it. Like we want a full transparency, kind of what's happening, right? About choices of components, but don't be in the day-to-day. Let us just do that. Let us automate that, and you basically then just focus what you want to have on the strategic stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where some of the emotion, it's just as I've been receiving and learning from you, Thorsten, on this. Like, I think people take comfort in the ticky-tacky tech details, but one of the big themes we've been seeing is that, it's less about the what and more about the so what and the now what. And so maybe pulling away from that might feel emotional, like that's some of these folks' bread and butter, but you got to get down to the why are we doing this and what are the business implications and kind of elevate. Yeah.
It's good.
It really makes sense.
Maybe we're already somehow to Q&A. So I could go more slides, but maybe in the meantime, I see 4 questions. Maybe I just answer them.
Yeah. No,
Sure.
please.
So the first question we got here is that obviously you are clearly in the business of removing mainframes and refactoring and getting people off. Are mainframe computers still being manufactured and deployed new?
Yes and no. There are some, like, obviously there are some like Siemens BS2000. I don't know if you even know that. Unisys, some they are already dead, but obviously the whole IBM mainframe suite, COS, AS400, they're full, they're a maintained system. I think the latest, I don't actually know if the EC14 or EC15 or BC, whatever, they always change it a little bit. But yes, absolutely, it's completely there.
It's still there, it's still being manufactured, it's still being sold, still being deployed. Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent. We had an interesting question in today's day and age, and our concern about carbon footprint and green IT. Do you have any sort of comments on, like, how is mainframe contributing to or not to the overall sort of carbon neutral or carbon reduction footprint of technology?
Yeah, so I think that's obviously a very important one, but probably also tough to answer. I would tackle it from 2 ways. Obviously, the mainframe, we all know, like, they're high, like you said it, Mike, right? It's a beast, 5.5 gigahertz, super fast. Like records are just being retrieved by a pointer and everything. And that's obviously one of the things, like, we need, like, if you have a scale out versus the scale up, you need to have different answers, parallelization and stuff. But I can give you, and yes, we're working on this to quantify. Can you give you quantifications, but I can give you just one analogy and just a little bit. So we had one huge batch job from a banking sector that probably did run 78 minutes on the mainframe. It did cost, I cannot tell about the carbon footprint, but about $100 on licenses by the MSU being used and stuff. And we then basically put this on Lambdas and ran it in parallel. And the costs were $1.55, and it ran, instead of 78 minutes, in 5 minutes. Obviously, we need to change something. I understand. It was just a queue where we then basically kind of get all the records on that queue. And then basically the Lambdas were just working it off. But with that, we're currently working, Deloitte is doing that. But basically, this is then like that change of an architecture will be then quantified the before and after. But it's not very, I don't know how much insight there is what the mainframe power consumption, everything. Obviously, that should be doable. So good point. As we do this, I think there's still something we probably should do on the mainframe itself. And the other one, I saw also a chart about how much a programming language costs from a green IT. So basically, the more interpreted, it's the more they cost versus kind of the native one. Mm-hmm. Like, no big surprise, the Pythons of the world, they cost you a lot. They're like, this line of code costs you a significant more if you have a C line. Java basically is really close with all the in-memory compilers and stuff that we have these days. But there's probably a good approach, and I missed the COBOL on that. That's again, this is always somehow that's the thing, right? It's all proprietary and it all sits there, and there's so little data. It's probably a good one.
Yeah. We got another very interesting question. You said most of landing zones in the last couple of years were in pure sort of native cloud, right? As you peel functionality and components off the mainframe. So if mainframes still are in production as an option, how do they fit in the modernization framework and strategy? Is it just keeping it alive until you eventually remove it? Like,
yeah,
how would you comment on that?
My first question, Dalibor, is your mainframe strategic, yes or no? And obviously sometimes you hear strategic, and but most of the time it's not. And the question is kind of, I probably just hit that slide pretty quick. So sure, basically, you can have them all coexist very well. On the right, you see the mainframe, the monolith, can be monoliths, and if you connect them to a CDC, change data capture, and to event-driven backplane, you can 100% work with it. Obviously, it can be just used in order to get the data in sync somewhere else, and then like just buy time. But obviously, if there's some things where you truly believe, this is where it's strategic, absolutely. And obviously, there's also C Cloud. So from like IBM is obviously also going into that hyperscaler approach, or basically offering service around the mainframe. Obviously, there's things. Yeah, it really depends kind of where you see it strategic. And if that's the answer, I will never talk someone out of his strategy.
Yeah, but I think what you are generally saying is that mainframe is a technology that works, but it's aging, and that you are making the case. I think that fast forward 10 years, it's likely we're not going to see any.
Yeah, if like it's always tied to the language and the operating system, and like COBOL, it has its advantages, don't get me wrong, but you don't even have like, obviously you couldn't do like, there are some object-oriented pieces of this, but no one knows them, right? No one wants to use it. Like, it's hard to find people that truly like it's not where I see the trend is going.
Right.
So with that being said, obviously you shouldn't care if it's a bounded context, a small service that basically owns, like, it doesn't matter how it's been implemented. So it technically could be COBOL. Microservice, sorry, that was looking for. That it shouldn't be mattering, right? But the trend is no, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and you know, Dalibor, I think your question and Thorsten's good answer kind of connects to another question we see where someone said, you know, does core mod or core modernization really only refer to mainframe modernization? And I think this is where semantics and language can be helpful or hurtful. I mean, every organization is always going to have some white hot innovation that 20 years later is a legacy headache.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, today's new hotness is tomorrow's old crusted. What was Men in Black, right? New hotness, old and busted. Yeah. The reason I go there is to say, no, core modernization right now applies predominantly to mainframes, because that's the era of stuff that, to your excellent point, Thorsten, it's the language and the boutique nature of it that's the problem, more so than the big metal. The big metal has been reliable, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think what we're starting to see, per Thorsten's point, is if you want all the new wonderful toys, all the interoperability, all of the emergence that our prior 5 Tech Trends sessions have dwelled on, then yeah, you know, eventually you're going to want to get on with what's next. And some of that stuff is on-prem, like I called it, mainframe by another name. High performance on-prem GPU compute. Is it mainframe? Is it not? It's not COBOL, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So it's really just a matter of, I guess, semantics in some cases.
Yeah, spot on. And it's quite that fun fact is what you said. We are basically also doing like some legacy Java, like same thing. The big monoliths back in days, that's even how Java applications, the struts of the worlds, like this is how they've been developed. And yes, if they're strategic, it's probably really worth cutting them apart into bounded context. Same thing. It's just the technology of the art. And obviously the design principles we hope we're finding now will probably last a bit longer, or at least they lasted also very long. But the Java ones that in the beginning, I think they are really at a short life cycle.
Oh man.
Thorsten, you have demonstrated absolute mastery in the details of this particular topic. So like this was really very, very insightful, and thank you so very much for finding the time to be with us. I mean, it's obviously you are the expert in this domain, and I would invite anyone from the audience who would like to learn more to reach out to you, Thorsten. Audience members, I have obviously recorded this session, so we're going to send a link if you'd like to review it. And of course, if there are any questions, comments, thoughts, worries, and plans to modernize your mainframe, Thorsten here and his team are the people to speak with, I think. Mike, I want to thank you so very much for your ongoing support in these last 7 episodes. We spent 7 hours talking, talking and unpacking tech trends. And we are now in April. And I know that you and the team are busy thinking, capturing, and documenting what's next in our tech trends. So I look forward to repeating this exercise with you again next year for Tech Trends 2024.
I'll see you in the future. But
yes.
All right.
Thorsten, Mike, thank you so very much. And our audience members, thank you very much. And we will reconnect again, same time, same place next week as we interview a Canadian tech executive. So we would like to welcome you back. And with that, thank you and have a lovely Wednesday afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.